Welcome to Lacrosse Classified on the Lax All-Stars Podcast Network. Your home for the latest news from the National Lacrosse League and indoor lacrosse. Now, let's talk some lacrosse with your hosts, Jake Elliott and Evan Schemenauer.
What's going on, lacrosse fans? Tuesday, Lacrosse All-Stars Podcast Network. You found us once again. It's Lacrosse Classified, episode number 74 here. 74 episodes. Jake Elliott, Evan Schemenauer back with you. I can't believe we're at 74, Evan. It doesn't seem all that long ago that we fired this thing up. Welcome back to Lax Class. Thanks for joining me. How's things going in Saskatoon, my friend?
Snowing like crazy.
Snowing
like we've probably had 8-10 inches of snow in the last couple of days.
We're in Canada, Evan. Use your metric system.
Okay. Basically, it would be about 20 to 25 centimeters. In the last couple of days here, it's been interesting. Tracy's already bored of being in the house. I guess I'm a little lucky in that I'm working most of the day, so it doesn't bother me as much. But well, first off, let's start with this.
Okay.
Happy almost 50th birthday.
Oh my goodness! I guess when this comes out, it will in fact be my birthday. I'm still a few years away from the big 50. Thank you very much, but I appreciate that, man. I didn't even think about that. We're recording here on Monday, and it's just another day to me. But I guess tomorrow is the full rotation around the sun, as my friend Brock Rose likes to say.
Well, maybe what you got to do is, because you're stuck in the home, coronavirus, right? COVID-19. You got to down 19 Coronas just for your birthday. What the heck, right?
You know, man, I don't even know if I could anymore. Like back when I was in my 20s, like in my mid-20s, like I could crush 20 beers like no problem, and I'm not over exaggerating. Like I could put them back, and now like I rarely drink. Like you see me have a drink in Saskatoon, and that's probably my only drink of the week.
Okay, but it's a double or triple.
Well, if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it. But that's part of the reason is that it just takes me so much alcohol to even get to a point where I feel like it's doing something. It's just not worth it to me. Empty calories as well, Evan. Now I got to watch the calorie intake, and it's just not worth it. No hangovers. No, I don't know. I'm kind of done with alcohol, man. I know you've been off it for a long time, and like, do you miss it?
Almost 30 years. Yeah. No, September 26th will be the 30th anniversary.
Oh, there you go. Congratulations, man. That's
But, to me, it was the first 6 months was difficult, where I almost had to remove myself from the social scene.
Sure.
And then ever since that time, like, people, from most of my close friends, understand exactly why I don't, right? Because it was a problem.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't really bother them. It's like, I'm still going to do my thing. I'm still going to be there, and just no alcohol in the system.
Yeah, that's good.
And I don't trust myself to ever go back. That's the thing, right?
Yeah, that's probably the smart play. And listen, this is a lacrosse podcast, by the way. And there's lots of people out there that are highly functioning people that like to drink a lot of alcohol. More power to them. It's just not my cup of tea. No judgment here. Obviously, do what you want. Just be safe and be reasonable. Be respectful. That's all we're asking here on Lax Class. Great program.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me when people drink around me.
No. I mean, I was like that with smoking when I quit smoking. I just could not be around it. And now I can be around it. I don't like it, but it is what it is. Anyways, Evan, let's get on track here, man, because we've got a great program coming up. We'll talk to the GM of the Vancouver Warriors, proud sponsors here on Lax Class, in about 20 minutes from now. Dan Richardson will join the program once again. We'll look forward to chat with Big Dan. And then we're going to go off the board here a little bit. We've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. Steve Holroyd from Retrolax Films is going to join us. Lacrosse historian, box lacrosse historian here, Evan, and he's been a big help with us while we've gotten through this March Madness Who You Got tournament. And now we're into the pre-90s bracket here, 90s and previous, so you can go back a ways here, and that's exactly what we'll do. So Steve's going to join us, and I think what we're going to do here, Evan, I'm just kind of telling you this right now, but I think what we'll do, we'll do our Who We Had here. We'll break down the 90s bracket momentarily. Then we'll talk to Dan. And then in quarter 3, we'll do under review and quick sticks in quarter 3. And then quarter 4, we'll just have Steve on as a guest and go through the Who You Got bracket with him. You cool with that?
Yeah, but I also got a few questions I'd like to ask him on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to do that as well. So, again, we'll kind of make it a double dip. We'll go to overtime, maybe, here on episode 74 of Lacrosse Classified this week. So look forward to that. Dan Richardson, Steve Holroyd coming up. And I just wanted to get his website in there as well, Evan, because I know he's got 2 things. He's got the Retrolax, and he's got, as I fill my my timeline up here looking for his website, Cross-Check Lacrosse is what his website is for all your kind of historical needs from Pro Box Lacrosse. So anyways, let's get into Stampede Tack's Who We Had. And the folks at Stampede Tack in Western Wear, Evan, they know that people are going through a tough time right now, and they couldn't be more aware of it. And Kevin is always so engaged with us, and that's what we really love about him, is that he's always kind of giving us updated information. He plays Who You Got, and he's always kind of staying in touch with us, which we love. So they wanted to let you know that many of you in the lacrosse community, whether it's a mom, a dad involved in my lacrosse, somewhere across North America, or even currently in the National Lacrosse League, are possibly a first responder, a medical professional, or someone else on the front lines fighting COVID-19. And we want to say thank you. On behalf of Stampede Tack and Westwear and Lacrosse Classified, thank you. We've been ringing our cowbell. I know I've been doing this as well, Evan, getting out on the deck and clapping at 7 p.m. every night. They also want to thank, and we also want to thank everyone that is still working in an essential job, truckers, grocery clerks, transit workers, countless others that are continuing to kind of keep us going here through this pandemic. So thank you to everybody that's still getting it done, especially our first responders on behalf of Stampede Tack and Lax Class. Okay, Evan, 1990s bracket here, and a couple of close votes and a couple of not-so-close votes. Where do we begin? We begin with the 1991 Turbos going up against the 1997 Shamrocks. This thing was a complete blowout right from the get-go. I think Shamrock fans have maybe shown up at the voting stations a little more than most other teams, Evan. Over 100 votes again here for the Shamrocks as they get it done. 76% as the Turbos were never really in this thing.
What did Freddie Jenner say? They would beat the
spandex off them. Yeah, they wore spandex back in 91. That was a good one.
Actually, I think the first 19 votes were all in the hands of the Shamrocks. So, over with very, very quickly. But, as you know, a Detroit Turbos team, maybe one of the factors is that with no team in Detroit today, that might be a factor.
Could be. Just young. Well, I mean, it came down to this. A young Gary Gate against a Gary Gate in his prime. And no contest, right? Mix in a Marichek in there as well. So 97 Chamois, they move on. They will take on the winner of 1995 Chiefs and 1995 Wings. This was also not a very close vote, Ev, as the Chiefs win this one 75%. So now we got a team that was 76% to win and a team that's 75% to win. 95 Chiefs will take on, as they take out the 95 Wings. They couldn't get it done. So we'll have an all-Canadian matchup in the Sweet 16, Chiefs and Rocks. That's going to be a dandy.
Yeah, and those Wings fans, I mean, I was surprised that they got beat up badly in both their matchups so far. So I don't know.
Yeah, well,
where the Wings fans are hiding that.
Well, those people out there listening, obviously all of us kind of follow the team account. I don't know why the team accounts are not retweeting to get their fans on board for this vote, Evan. It's beyond me why somebody running that social media account wouldn't just say, hey, Wings Nation, we got to vote here. Simple. Just put your finger on the screen and you're done. But I don't know. Some teams are kind of, Peterborough, Victoria, they're retweeting. We've seen Calgary do it. But
the Rush did it.
Yeah, Rush. Some do, some don't. And it could cost you as we move into the later rounds. Let's move on to our next matchup, Evan. 92. This was much closer than I thought it was going to be. 92 Bandits against the 91 Salmon Bellies, Evan. And the Bandits squeaked this thing out 51%.
Literally, if one person had voted the other direction, it would have been a tie.
Huh.
Literally that much. That's how close it was.
Well, I can only do so much. I know you too, Evan. I usually, one day I'll retweet him on Lax Class. The next day I'll retweet him from my account. I'll go back the next. You should get a couple of retweets in there as well. Get this thing, because circulated through the timeline on a daily basis, I think, is key.
Well, what I've also done, though, is in the last day or two, if something's close, I'll actually put it up there saying, this is close. Not saying who's ahead. It's just saying, this is close. Get your vote in, right?
Yeah, we're not trying to influence either way, but, the fans, again, Evan, you can stand by your pick, but the fans are the ones dictating who moves along here.
Which you're about to stand by your pick, I take it?
Yes, absolutely. No, I'm not. 90, what do we got here? 93. I was up close and personal with this 93 team. Maybe that's why but it was a close vote here. What it was, 56% as the 99 Rock move on.
Well, the 99 Rock were close to my heart, but
well, there you go.
It was a heck of a team. It really was.
Yeah. So we both had So now what do we have here? I can't.
No, that was the only one we were different on.
Okay, so now, What was it? I was leading by 3, back down to 2 now. Is that?
I'm not even count. I don't even count that because I'm sticking by my. Pick.
Okay, so just to recap here. When the fans agree with you, then they're right. But when the fans don't agree with you, then they're wrong. Is that? So you're more or less calling our listeners uninformed listeners, Evan. You're saying that they're wrong.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying I'm sticking by my pick. And since we can't actually play the game, we will actually never fully know who would win it.
Okay. I'm up 2 after the 90s bracket is complete. So we got what? We got 12 out of the 16 teams in the Sweet 16, Evan. And some of these matchups that are coming up, this is going to be good stuff here as we move into the Sweet 16. And we'll punch those final 4 games next week here.
Well, this is where it really, really gets tough because there's a team from 1945 in this bracket.
I remember it well, Evan. I remember it well.
Well, like I was saying, your 80th birthday coming up? Sure.
Well, that's what we got Steve on for. He'll help us immensely for that. But why don't we get to break here on episode 74, and let's get the boss of the Vancouver Warriors on the phone. Dan Richardson will join us here on Lax Class when we return on the Lax All-Stars Podcast Network.
A Vancouver Warriors game at Rogers Arena sounds like this.
Jones shoots and he scores! Diving effort from Mitch Jones.
Nothing's monotone.
Lee and Beers go crashing into the crease.
Nothing's boring.
Now we're going to have a fight. It's the captain squaring off.
And at Vancouver Warriors games,
loads up.
Nothing's offside.
Tries a shot and he scores!
Experience it for yourself. Vancouver Warriors tickets are available now. Tickets starting from $19.95. Visit VancouverWarriors.com/tickets today.
Hey, this is Kevin Crowley from the Philadelphia Wings. You're listening to Lax Clash, your go-to source for all things NLL and box lacrosse.
Welcome back to Lacrosse Classified here on the Lax All-Stars Podcast Network. You just heard the Vancouver Warriors where nothing's offside. You can visit them at vancouverwarriors.com, and we're going to talk to the general manager of the Vancouver Warriors right now. I guess if we got any questions, you'll answer them. And Dan, you can maybe let us know how things are going with the NLL Warriors. Welcome back to the podcast. First things first, how are you and yours keeping through this global pandemic that we're in?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me back. And it's pretty crazy times that we're in, and we're following all the social distancing guidelines and trying to stay healthy. And but it's a grind, and unfortunately all the stuff I read and watch seems like we're going to be at this for a while, but who knows?
Yeah, and I guess kind of scary early days, especially for Canuck Sports and Entertainment, with a person being tested positive for COVID-19, and you guys were sent home almost immediately, and that was a few weeks ago, but by talking with you just before coming on here, Dan, everybody okay, nobody else had contracted the virus, and that's got to be relieving and real lucky, quite frankly.
The Canucks Sports Entertainment were very quick to react, and everybody was told to work from home, and that's where we stayed. And we have regular calls, and we got our emails, and we've had, we originally were going to do bi-weekly calls with the players. We had one call, and then we didn't want to have a second call if there was nothing new to update them. So we canceled last week's call, and we'll reconvene as soon as there's more information to share with them. But so right now we're in a holding pattern.
And I guess from the league's perspective, is everything still really on the table as to, do you play out the regular season? Do you go straight to the playoffs? Or what's the dynamic there, I guess, at this stage, now that we're a few weeks in?
Well, I mean, I haven't been on the governor's calls, but my boss has kept me informed. And I think they're going to be making some type of announcement during this week. Now, I would assume that it's probably something to do with the regular season, but again, I'm not at those calls. I mean, I think that they've got a whole different bunch of scenarios that they've talked about continuing the regular season with, maybe less games, having some scenarios on playoffs with 4 teams, 8 teams, 12 teams. And, I think there's a whole bunch of different ideas and scenarios that they're looking at. But of course, they're really at the, they really can't do anything until basically the U.S. and Canadian government decide that they're going to open the borders up, because right now you can't, it's only, what's the term for crossing the border?
Essential.
The essential services. Which, as much as we love sports, we're not
you telling me lacrosse isn't it's essential in my life, Dan, I can tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you want to stay positive about this, but, I was saying to Jake off air there, you just keep reading and hearing all this stuff on the news. So
yeah, you look at the dates and the sports getting canceled and the future. I mean, we're all going to get through this thing, but you start to look at who's canceling what and who's postponing what, and the light gets a little dimmer each day as it goes by, I would say. But you got to hold out hope that things are going to make the turn, and I know here in BC we're kind of ahead of the curve a little bit. But anyways, Dan, let's get on to some lacrosse talk here, and
sure.
If things do come to an end and the season does end where your last game ended, and that was in Saskatchewan, give me an overall letter grade on where you thought your team ended up, and what were your expectations going into the year? Did you meet those? Did you underachieve? Did you do some things well? Give me the general synopsis on the half of the year that was.
Well, I think that we had a good start to the season, and after making some changes and bringing in Nick Billich. Unfortunately, that was
tough.
A bad start, a tough start for us with Nick, and because we could see very quickly he was going to be a real good part of our defense. As far as the season went, we hit a lull there in the middle that we weren't happy with. There were a couple games, the San Diego game, the 11-10 game, and there was one other that we should have had easily, and our record could have been, instead of 5 wins, we could have easily been at 7 or 8 wins and been right in the hunt in the West. As you know, the West was wide open, and so that didn't happen. And so, if you ask me to put a letter grade on it, C plus. Like we had expectations that we were going to compete with San Diego and Colorado for that what we envisioned to be that third playoff spot. As it turns out, Calgary didn't get off to a very good start, which opened it right up in the West. So, I think that we've made some positive changes, and if this is the end of the season for us, we look forward to adding somebody like Brett Mydske, who I look at that as being a first-round pick, and then of course we'll get back into the draft game, and we've already been working hard on putting together lists from the information that we have so far.
That was actually one of the things I was going to ask you about. Is you promised us at the last time we talked that you're keeping that first-round pick.
Yeah,
you still got it. What's the thought process behind it? Is it you're going to try and fill a need, or is it an East versus West balance, or is it you're taking the best player available at that stage?
Well, so to answer the first question first, we are definitely keeping that pick. We've had, when the trading deadline was starting to heat up there, we had, a couple teams we were talking to, and we were going to make some moves. And people were asking again about that pick, and politely we said no. So we're going to keep that pick and in our second rounder and our third rounder, and we're going to continue to try and build this team with our drafts and our free agents, and if we have to, we'll trade people. And we can't afford to stand pat, and we've got to make some changes. So as far as who, that's yet to be determined, but we need improvement in a bunch of areas, and so we have our meeting with our scouts and our coaching staff. That'll be determined, but there's some good players available, and now that we're going to be, if the season is indeed over, then we're going to be drafting in that number 3 spot.
Yeah, and you're going to get a real good pick in that number 3 spot as we speak with Dan Richardson of the Vancouver Warriors. And talking about building your roster, Dan, well, the other thing you guys, I think, have done a pretty good job of in Vancouver is building your fan base. As Evan and I have kind of made note of it here on Lax Class, we've seen the numbers for each home game kind of go up, and I think the entertainment value has gone up as well. And you guys continue to try and find ways. We saw the Biz Nasty promotion this year, which I thought was just fantastic. And you're always kind of pushing the envelope, looking for new ways to draw in fans. And how do you feel about the work that you've done there, building the Warriors fan base?
I can't say enough good things about the Connect Sports and Entertainment staff. They push the envelope. They know that the millennials are really the fan base that we want to go after, and they've done a really good job of attracting them. And it's unfortunate that the season is on hold right now, because there was a little bit of momentum happening there, and we were trying to make sure that we were holding up our end of the bargain and being competitive at home. So there's some good things that were happening this year, and hopefully we can build on that for the next few years, because the lacrosse loyalists are there, but they've tapped into the new market, the millennials who like to come and like the style of play, and certainly love the entertainment that the people at CSE are put on for them.
Are you going to give Bissonnette another look in 2021?
Well, that's above my pay grade to make that decision. But he's I know the guys really enjoyed him when he did come out, and he's a very smart man, and people can say a lot of things about him, but he's a smart businessman, and I was very impressed in meeting him and working with him, and so I hope that they find a way to get him back, but that's above my pay grade to make that decision.
Now, Brett Mydske signing was, of course, the biggest move of the year. I think it was. Second biggest move of the year was probably releasing Aaron Bold. Maybe take us through that decision. And was it so much of giving Eric Penny that boost that you're our guy at this stage?
That was a big part of it. Is that we just felt that Eric has been in the league for a while and needed to know that he had the confidence of his coaching staff and management and the players, and we wanted to take that next step and anoint him as our number one goalie. And I have all sorts of time for Eric, and we just have to provide a better defense in front of him so that he can have time to get himself set up. And, I think we were headed that way. But, you can't use injuries as an excuse because every team faces those injuries. Where we have problems is, we don't have the depth yet as other organizations have, but we're certainly building towards that. And I like some of the additions that we were able to add this year.
Yeah, and I guess another new addition, Dan, that you added comes behind the bench, and as you make a move there, Rory McDade no longer with the team, but you bring in an NLL Hall of Famer and Caleb Toth, who has some coaching experience in the NLL, but more so in the WLA as the head coach of the Nanaimo Timbermen, and this is a big addition. I've watched Caleb do some coaching, and he runs pretty hot, and I think he's going to get the most out of these guys. What was the decision process behind hiring Niner?
We just felt that we needed a bit of a change up front there, and I've watched Caleb as a in the Western Lacrosse Association and how he has taken that franchise and really put it on his back and developed those young players that they attracted over there, and he's got a bit of fire and brimstone in him. I've heard him down the hallway, and I've heard him, on the bench, and not that I want our coaching staff to be like that 100% of the time, but I think you have to do that every once in a while to let them know, that you're in charge and you're the guy with the whistle. And it's unfortunate that when we brought him in, the season came to a screeching halt, because I was very impressed with his first practice that we had the day we signed him, and came over, and his speech to the players when we introduced him, I can't repeat it all on air, but it got everybody's attention. So we're looking forward to that. Yeah.
Who are those one or two Warriors that you think that, how can I put it, either underrated or fly completely under the radar and don't get noticed really as much as they should?
Tyler Codron, he had a very good year for us, and his leadership, during the games and at practices, you can't really put a price on that. So I'm very impressed with Tyler, and there's a couple guys that I think that finally have cracked the lineup that I think that they need some more seasoning, but I see guys like Rowe and Claire adding to our defense, and once they get a little bit more confidence, and and the good thing is that they were able to get into the lineup and get a taste of what it was like. So I see a big upside for those two guys, and the one that started off really slow, new to the organization, but hit his stride in the middle of the season was Lowen. Yeah. And, he's everything that everybody said about him. And then Coach Gill raved about him. And, we went out and got him. And, he had a bit of a slow start, but I think he was just feeling himself both on and off the floor. but boy, by mid-season there, he was just hitting his stride, and so we're excited that we know that we have him, and he'll be another piece to build around.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, a big Roddy fan for sure. And Lloyd to me really stood out for me, a nice draft pick that kind of emerged out of nowhere through camp and really kind of pushed himself into the lineup. And then Lyndon Bunyo, who kind of got his opportunity a little bit later and for me was really noticeable when he was on the turf. Yeah,
he's one of those guys, again, that you give him some confidence and got him into the lineup, and he's a guy that I'm sure most teams hate because he's an agitator. He's a loose ball hound, and he can bury from the dirty zone there, and he sets good hard picks. He just works hard at everything that he does. So, that's a good thing. And Derek, we just love Derek. He was banged up there. He had a wrist. His wrist was not 100% there. So, but he was a gamer, and those are the types of guys that we're gonna build our depth on, and will look well for us in the future.
Of course, last summer you were still the GM also of the Salmon Bellies, and we saw this transition where a lot of the Warriors players came to New West and got to play with one another a little more often. Is it something that's still going to be pursued if there is a summer season this year?
Yeah, that's probably a better question to ask. I've maintained contact, and I talked to Ray Porcelato on an ongoing basis, and he's made some acquisitions just before everything was shut down in the NLL, but I know that he's happy with the guys that play both with the Bellies and with the Warriors, so I'm hopeful that will continue. And but we've got guys now. Obviously, we got a good core of guys in Ridge.
Yeah, what's that going to be like for you, Dan? Now that you're solely the GM of the Vancouver Warriors, but you got belly blood running through you for the last 2 decades. But now you got players kind of spread out throughout the league. Are you going to be able to kind of like cheer for these teams, or are you just going to try and just pull for the guys more than anything?
Yeah, I guess I don't. Obviously, I'm going to be pulling for the players that wear the Warriors jersey in the winter. But this is all going to be new to me.
Yeah.
So, it'll be different because I'm not big on sitting still. So I'll be pacing. I usually pace back and forth. For me to go sit in the stands.
I don't know if I've ever seen you sit in the stands. I know exactly where to look for you in Queen's Park every time I'm there.
Yeah, so not having that tunnel to pace in, that will be different. But, I hope that our the teams in the WLA and the BC Junior League are going to survive this. And I hope that there's lacrosse in the summer, but again, we're at the whim of the governments, especially in the summer league, because all those buildings they play in are, owned by the municipalities. And so they're all closed up and locked up right now.
Yeah, well, all we can do, Dan, is do our part, stay home, stay away from people, wash your hands, don't touch your face, all that sort of stuff. And if everybody does that, the world's going to be a much better place a lot quicker. Be safe, be well, my friend, and appreciate you doing this, and we'll look forward to the Warriors getting back out on the turf hopefully sooner than later.
Thanks very much, and to both of yours family, and stay safe.
Well, Evan, we covered a lot in that 15-20 minutes there with the Warriors, boss.
Yeah, definitely was not a shortage of questions we asked, and
that's what I say. It's like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I don't have any new information to talk. So don't worry. We'll come up with some things.
Yeah. But maybe here's the way to, if this is the end of the season, to look at the Warriors, is that first off, this was a building process. It remains a building process, and they're building. Yeah. The other thing is that there's 2 keys to really building this team. One is having a team that is starting to improve, that some of these guys closer to the end of the prime of their careers are going to want to come home and play too. And two, having the revenue base to actually be able to pay them, right?
Yeah.
We saw the crowds go up. We saw the crowds definitely continue
That's the
to
most
go up.
encouraging thing
Great
to me.
side.
That's the most
And
encouraging
with a
thing.
few extra wins, the confidence will start to build.
Yeah, home wins are key, but that, to me, that's the most encouraging thing that I saw throughout the year at Rogers Arena is that the fan base was going up. And that tells me they're doing the right things, and that includes sponsoring this podcast right here on Lacrosse Classified. Evan, let's take a quick break. We got under review and quick sticks in quarter 3, bumping it up, and then we'll get to Steve Holroyd and who you got in quarter number 4. Stick around, episode 74, Lacrosse Classified on the Lax All-Stars Podcast Network.
Pure Vita Labs is proud to bring you the highest quality sports supplements on the market. PVL products are 100% all-natural with no artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners. And the entire line is also Informed Choice certified. We designed all our products with the athlete in mind. We look forward to being a part of your athletic achievements, helping you push the bar higher, win at the highest levels, and set personal records for years to come.
Hey, this is Jamie Dowick, owner and GM of the Toronto Rock. You're listening to Lax Class, your go-to source for all things NLL and box lacrosse. Growing the game one podcast at a time.
Welcome back. Third quarter action is underway here on Lax Class. Jake Elliott, Evan Schemenauer with you. Big thanks to Dan Richardson for spending a little time. I think people are actually eager to talk to us right now, Evan. Sometimes it's difficult lining up guests, day, time, all the rest of it. And lately it's been like, sure, whenever I'm home, I'm doing nothing, like whenever you want. Yeah, as long as you want. So thanks to Dan for spending a little time here on Lax Class. It's time now for some quick sticks. Usually we do this in quarter 4, but changing things up here a little bit for episode number 74. Evan, things I have the 7 p.m. cheer, which we talked about, where this is really a phenomenon that is happening all over Canada and I believe the USA now. If it's not, it should be, where people head out onto their deck or out onto the street at 7 p.m., wherever they may live, and just start hooting and hollering, banging pans, whistling, banging sticks, whatever you got to recognize our medical frontliners, our first responders, our essential workers. This thing kind of born and bred organically, but I think it's just the perfect way to kind of recognize these people.
Yeah, I don't know if that happens here or not. I mean, I haven't really stuck my head out at that time.
Well, you should.
So
start it, Evan.
I need to tonight. Yeah, we'll
just
finish
do it.
The podcast right around the time I need to get my head outside. So yeah,
okay.
Tonight we're doing it.
Perfect. Love to hear it. I know it started out very slowly here in Port Coquitlam, but it has gained a lot of steam. I think it actually started in downtown Vancouver in False Creek, where it's kind of like an enclosed circumference. So it really got loud, and then people kind of picked it up and started to do it other places, and now everybody's doing it. So I highly suggest you do that. And on the lines of those people, couple of mentions here. First to Joe Tsai from the San Diego Seals, the owner of the Seals, and his massive donation of N95 masks. And us a little closer to the heart, Evan and the Urban family, who have donated the use of their RVs to nurses and doctors who need to isolate themselves from their families to not infect them while they work on the front lines. Two great owners in the National Lacrosse League, pouring out their heart and doing two phenomenal things to help humanity here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I can only imagine for Western RV, this is not an easy time of the year. This is supposed to be their busiest time of the year, trying to sell RVs. And I can't imagine they're getting too many sold with all the uncertainty right now. So, you know what, you got excess inventory, you can help. It's a great way to help. Absolutely.
Proud to work for the Urban family for sure. TikTok, Evan, I don't know if you saw Jenner's latest installment. As the Accursi, the No Mercies, Evan, have started to challenge some NLL personalities around the league to keep up with theirs. As Jenner said, it took him 358 takes, but he got it. Have you seen this? It was like a hyper turbo speed Macarena or something.
I thought he gave up on TikTok after he dropped his phone off the balcony.
That's an expensive TikTok.
Yeah, there's some interesting ones. Jeff and Lindsay Schattler.
Oh my goodness!
Really, really interesting ones going
on. I think
they've been borrowing one another's clothes a little too much. But
speaking of alcohol, I think some may be factored into their. But they are absolute gold. Check those out. Schattler Academy. You can watch their TikToks. What else do I got down here? Just BCLA coming out. WLA, BC Junior, delaying their talks. They were supposed to meet April 15th. They've pushed this back. Evan, we know this is going to go much, much longer than we expected, so expect more of these dates to come out. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be on OTCB this week with Teddy, so look for that coming out on Thursday in his 20 for 20 feature that he's having. And why am I going on to 20? This is my 20th year, Evan, of broadcasting. I can't believe that.
My goodness.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Well, if you had to count how many arenas you broadcasted in,
yeah, I'll have to. That would be. I got time. I should maybe look into that. Anyways, let's move along from that. A couple more NLL notes here. Check out their Spotify, Evan. They've put out some playlists for each team, and then an NLL playlist. Everybody can use a good playlist. I think this is pretty cool. NLL on Spotify.
I'm just getting through the games on True Classics right now, and once again, that whole point of how far the broadcasts have come, you start to notice it on a few of these. It's like, arena cam. That's definitely an arena cam.
There you go. Last one I got here from the NLL is they completed the longest pass in history. I've been going from San Diego to Halifax. Each player in each market making a little pass on Instagram there. Did you watch that?
I saw it, and I'm just like, and of course, I've studied geography for years. I'm like, there's a shorter way to do this.
Of course, leave it to you to work on the geography. All right, Evan, I think it's time now. We haven't done it for a couple of weeks. Let's go under review.
It's time for Under Review, presented by G. Wilson Construction. Each week, Jake and Evan answer a listener's question or break down an unusual call that happened in a game. The challenge flag has been thrown, so now it's time to take the matter under review.
Under Review, brought to you by G. Wilson Construction, building fine, custom homes all over the place. They've put the big castle up there for Thomas Tull on hold, but they'll get back at it. And when they do, make sure you got your resume submitted to G. Wilson Construction and maybe start your career building fine custom homes with our friends at G. Wilson Construction out there in Vancouver, Whistler, you name it. Big thanks to them for their support and for sponsoring Under Review. And Evan, we haven't done Under Review for a couple of weeks, but we want to, so we're going to. And this week we're going to talk about, I've had a lot of, not recently, but over the last few months, had a lot of people asking about different moves on roster, protected players, practice players, unrestricted, restricted, franchise, all the different holdout lists, all these different labels for roster moves in the National Lacrosse League. And I want you to try and break this down and make this as concise and as clear as possible for the listeners.
Yeah, and I'm going to guarantee you I'm probably missing a couple things on this list because there are so many different lists. And that's one thing that maybe they need to take a look at and clean up a bit because the's so many lists.
A lot of loopholes for players to kind of move around without being penalized, or if they're hurt but they're not really hurt, but they're going on the IR, that kind of thing. There's ways to manipulate roster moves here so you don't penalize yourself.
All right. Okay, let's start with some basics here. So roster size, and this is basically kind of where it lays down. Before the season starts, you can have up to 40 players signed to your active roster. Now, but by the time you get to the week before the season starts, you must have that down to 21 active roster players. And you can have an additional 4 practice roster players. Now, the practice roster players, They can come to practice. They can participate in practices. They cannot be on the floor for anything beyond the first warm-up. The first warm-up, they can be out there. They can't be there for the second one. And they can't play. And the pay, to be frankly honest, is pretty poor with this. It is, I believe it went up to $2,000 US for the season. So these are guys that are still trying to hang on to the league and what have you. And to be honest, a lot of these players do actually play in things like the ALL and whatnot just to get more games in. Now, these practice roster players, two things with it. One is that when you're put onto a practice roster, you are allowed to, if a team asks you to go onto a practice roster, you are allowed to reject it. That is one thing that is absolute. We've seen that happen a few times. It doesn't happen too often.
Fournier, probably the last one to do it.
Yeah, but he can say, sorry, I don't want to go on there and take their chances elsewhere. The other thing is that at the end of every season, they become free agents unless the player voluntarily goes and decides to restrict themselves with the team. And we actually did see that happen this offseason. Devlin Shanahan, for example, was one of those players that did that. Now, when we look at free agency, there's four different categories we could be looking at. One is a restricted free agent, one is a restricted agent, subject to a qualifying offer. One's an unrestricted free agent, and one's an unrestricted free agent that can reject the franchise tag. It's already starting to confuse you, I can tell you. So let's start with this. Restricted free agent means your contract has ended, however, you have not reached the age of 30. Therefore, you are allowed to go and seek out another contract with any other team. However, if you do sign an offer sheet with another team, your old team has 72 hours to match your offer. And so they can match the offer or they can take the compensation. That's up to them. There is this one category which is restricted free agent subject to a qualifying offer. And the way that one player explained it to me one time was that the qualifying offer means you have to have received at least a 5% raise from the prior year. So the team has to make you an offer to say, here, we're going to give you a 5% raise over next year. It doesn't necessarily have to be the contract you ultimately sign. But if they don't make that qualifying offer to you, you become an unrestricted free agent. So that's why they would want to do that. UFAs, typically, it's end the contract, you're 30 years old, you're free to go wherever you want, except for the franchise tag. Okay, the franchise tag states that every team is allowed to franchise one player that is over the age of 30, and they can protect that player. Now, bad thing, you don't get to decide where you're going to go play. Good thing is you get a 25% bump in pay. But then once you turn 34 years old, we get into another category, which is you can reject the franchise tag. So if the team offers it to you, the team can still offer you the franchise tag, much like Halifax offered Ryan Benesh the franchise tag. He's over 34 years old, but Benesh had the right to reject it if he wanted to, but if he accepted it, he gets the extra pay. So that's kind of where that lays in there. Confusing enough for you already?
I'm just staying out of your way here, man. Keep rolling.
Okay, so let's get into a few other niceties. So, for example, there's another thing in here called a player has been moved to the active roster, maintains the practice player.
See, these are the things I think people are wanting to understand, Evan. The short-term holdout, the IR situation, and this, maintain practice player but active roster sort of stuff.
Okay, so in this situation, this is a player that's getting called up really on a temporary basis, and they do get a bump in pay and whatnot for the time that they're on the active roster. But the player has voluntarily agreed that they will stay on the practice roster. So let's say the team needs to fill a spot for one game. Somebody's injured or somebody can't make it, what have you. The practice roster player agrees to maintain that practice roster tag they go up and they can be brought back down to the practice roster without the risk of that player saying, no, I'm leaving the team. That's one thing that's there. There's a couple different injured reserve lists. One's short-term, one's long-term. With the short-term, you have to be out, I believe it is 4 days. So you, in effect, have to miss one weekend of the season. But what that allows you is that if you are hurt, you still get paid, and the team can bring somebody up from the practice roster or sign a free agent or what have you on a temporary basis to fill your spot. And it, in fact, opens up a roster spot to fill your spot while you're injured. But then there's also the season-ending IR, which is pretty obvious. It's you're done for the year. And then there's a couple others, which are the short-term holdouts and the long-term holdouts. It's just called a holdout. The holdout is typically where a player, let's put Westberg into this conversation, onto holdout list. Last year he was on a holdout list for an entire year. Paul Rabel remains on a holdout list for the last 7 years. And that, in Rabel's case, he had a contract. He didn't play the entire contract out. So there's still a contract to be played there. So I believe it's the Toronto Rock that still hold his rights.
They do, yep.
And basically is that if Paul Rabel decided he ever wanted to play lacrosse again, he would actually either have to go play for Toronto or Toronto would have the ability to trade him. And Toronto doesn't burn up a roster spot by the fact that Rabel's not around.
Box lacrosse. He still plays.
Yes.
Plays lacrosse.
Correct. And then you got short-term holdout lists, which is commonly used. For example, let's say a player's got a work commitment and can't make a game. That's a common use of this one here, where simply put, you're not coming for that one game or however long the short-term holdout is. You're not getting paid, but the team has the ability to put somebody in your spot temporarily while this holdout is taking place. That's the typical methodology behind that. There's probably others that are out there. I'm certain there is. There's a suspended list, of course, right? And there's which, once again, you can replace that player while he's on the suspended list. But I'm certain I'm missing others.
All right. Well, if you are missing any others, Evan, and somebody's like, oh, you didn't talk about this, then just tweet at us at LaxClass, at PXP for Sports, at ShemLax, and ask us something that you want us to take under review, maybe next week, maybe a couple of weeks. We'll see how it goes. But hopefully Evan made all that gibberish
what I'm missing right now is physically unable to perform. I completely missed it, right?
Oh, the pup. Yes, the pup list, they call that. Physically unable to perform. That means you got an injury, and that could be a long-term or a short-term injury. Am I right on that? Just you can't.
Yeah, like a lot of these guys are normally, they're coming into the season with an injury, like say they got injured in summer league or something like that, right? And they're just not able to perform.
So more or less, the rules here are curtailed to help teams kind of protect their players and not get penalized when they need to make some moves. It's very free-flowing and kind of there's lots of different avenues and riverways to take here to kind of maintain your roster. It's very GM-friendly, I would say.
Oh, yeah. Let's be straight. I've seen situations where somebody has been consistently put on the IR, like almost every second game. And it was almost to the point of, yeah, this guy's still getting paid, but rather than sending him down to the practice roster,
the Quinn Palace rule, yeah. Okay, so hopefully that's a little clearer than it was when we started this segment 10 minutes ago. And if it's not, well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, read the rule book, I guess. Let's get to break, Evan, and then let's get to quarter number 4. On the other side, Stampede Tack, who you got? March Madness, greatest box lacrosse team of all time, pre-90s bracket, and a little help from lacrosse historian Steve Holroyd. All next, right here on episode 74 of Lax Class on the Lax All-Stars Podcast Network.
Associated Labels and Packaging, a fun family company that offers premium quality labels and packaging with unparalleled service. With 40 years of experience, an extensive product catalog, and an ever-growing fleet of equipment, Associated Labels and Packaging is the perfect fit to take your labels and packaging to the next level.
Hey, this is PVL athlete Zach Currier of Team Canada Lacrosse, the Calgary Roughnecks, and Peterborough Lakers. You're listening to Lacrosse Class, growing the game one podcast at a time.
Welcome back to Lacrosse Class into quarter number 4. That means no more breaks here on Lacrosse Class. It's Jake Elliott, it's Evan Schemenauer with you, and now joined by lacrosse historian, box lacrosse historian, pro lacrosse historian, Steve Holroyd from crosscheck.com, Retrolax Films as well. Looking forward to this conversation, Steve. And the way I kind of always start off a conversation with somebody new that I've never talked to, and especially somebody like yourself, how did you find the game of lacrosse? And more importantly, how did you become a historian of the sport?
Good questions. Good evening. Thanks for having me. Lacrosse found me, I guess. Although I was born in Nova Scotia, I grew up in the southern New Jersey area outside of Philadelphia, and we didn't really have any kind of field lacrosse history at all. But in 1974, a brand new team and a brand new league, the Philadelphia Wings and the National Lacrosse League, came to town. And from the very start, I was utterly fascinated by this game that the TV ads advertised as being the fastest game on 2 feet. And although that league disappeared in 2 years, when it came back in '87, at that point I was old enough to buy a stick, go out and play. We did pick up box. It was just a game that spoke to me, and so I was always a fan. But I treated my sports, whether it was soccer, baseball, I really like the history aspect of things. And with baseball, we're so spoiled down here with history. You know, back of a baseball card tells you everything you want to know. And as I got into lacrosse more, it just kind of bugged me that, wait, there's got to be more to this game than a league that started in 1987 or another league that tried for 2 years in the 70s. And I started poking around, and it turns out that professional lacrosse, professional box lacrosse in particular, has a very interesting and surprisingly deep history going back to its literal invention in 1931. And so I started writing about it, and at CrossCheck, my partner there is a guy named Dave Coleman. Meanwhile, he was he sort of came to the game the same way I did, Philadelphia area, followed the Wings, started playing, and he was all about film. He was grabbing all this old film footage he could. So the two of us wound up getting together, and we put together a site, again, focusing mostly on professional box lacrosse, and so here we are.
So I don't know if you're in the same boat as Joe Feld was when we talked to him last week, but you're going through VHS and 8mm and almost probably every type of tape you could imagine to bring these games back to life.
And you've also found a way to take pictures like black and white photos and colorize them as well, which I find absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hit or miss thing. But because I know the other day, I think we colorized a Green Gaels photo and it came out red, and you know that can't be the right color for the Oshawa Green Gaels. But when it comes out right, it's really nice because, again, you're so used to seeing black and white. I mean, even with the original National Lacrosse League getting coverage in, say, Sports Illustrated, they didn't really spend money on color film. So bringing some color to the history is nice. And the other great thing about CrossCheck popping up is ex-players have been coming out of the woodwork and reaching out to us. And it's not simply saying, oh, great job, thank you. I mean, that's appreciated. But they go the next step and say, hey, I got this box of stuff that's been sitting in my attic for 30 years. Would you like it? And so, I drive up to Ontario, meet Larry Lloyd, and get a box of stuff that
no way.
Is a name we're going to be hearing from. And it's got color photos, negatives. I get the negatives developed. Turns out they're colored. The first color National Lacrosse Association stuff I've ever seen. So, yeah, it's the thrill of discovery is great. The fact that the lacrosse community, particularly ex-players, are really, really enjoying what we're doing. And I say that because I've done soccer history for over 20 years now. I was actually much more of a soccer player growing up. I've done a lot of soccer history. And, of course, in the United States, it's just an alphabet soup of failed leagues that you're covering. But players there really just don't care. I have my theories why. I won't bother you with them. But the lacrosse community, on the other hand, they think it's great. Jim Watson, Pat Dilford, Larry Lloyd, all these legends from the 70s coming out and saying, "Oh, this is fabulous," and thank you, and tell write about it more. I mean, it's been a great, very rewarding experience across the board.
Absolutely, man. And these are guys from the 70s. Like, I know, like, my playing career was kind of late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, and it's hard to find stuff from that era even, never mind going back to the 70s. So I think that's fantastic that guys are kind of feeding you that stuff and you're actually doing stuff with it. So we speak with lacrosse historian Steve Holroyd here, and where can the people go if they want to see this stuff? I know Retrolax, and just give them the website, give them the addresses here if they want to find your stuff.
The main site is crosscheck.com, and that's cross with an E, like the lacrosse stick. And there you'll find original articles about the various leagues that have come and gone. You also find a lot of reproduced articles from programs, reproduced newspaper articles, a lot of primary sources being reproduced. That's where you find a lot of the pictures as well. If you like pictures, there's an Instagram account, Crosscheck Lacrosse. Again, that's cross with the E, like the stick again, where there's a lot of the colorized pictures you were talking about. And although you can link all the videos from the main site, there's also on YouTube, the page is Retrolax, which is our original name. And that's where you'll find a lot of the old footage, including a lot of complete games, a few from the original National Lacrosse League era from 74, 75. A lot of the major indoor lacrosse league stuff, including a lot of championship games and things like that. Some documentaries. I mean, you mentioned 8mm. We were able to get a hold of an 8mm copy of the NFL Films documentary on lacrosse in 75, featuring primarily the Philadelphia Wings. And so it leads for the first time. That's been on YouTube for a while, but for the first time, there's a quality transfer, if you will. So, and including the very first newsreel footage, the very first box lacrosse game played in the United States was May in 1932 at Madison Square Garden, and British Pathé was there to film it. So you get to see these guys running around and beating, and you see a literal assault. I mean, one guy just swings a stick and hits another guy in the head with it.
I have seen that. I have seen that. Was Steve Sable voicing the NFL films of the 70s?
No, but John Facenda.
Okay, awesome.
Who did who's the guy, the voice of God, who did most of the NFL narration in the 70s. So, yes, it's John Facenda.
Very cool. All right.
Now,
sorry, go ahead.
So when people talk about greatest player of all time, of course, most of the names that come up are names of recent memory. Gate, Tavares, Grant, right? When you go through your studies, does that knowledge of the past sway you in where you maybe perceive some of these greatest of all time?
It helps. I mean, the problem, I don't know if problem's the word, but like most sports, with possible exception of baseball, the game has evolved. It's so tough to make an apples-to-apples comparison. For instance, not so much with the Gates or Tavares, because I mean they were still playing in the era when you played on both sides of the ball. But some of the great goal scorers today, they're going out and using a hockey fancy stance analogy. They're getting these offensive zone starts. They're not on the floor until they have possession and they're in their half of the floor, as opposed to the guys like from the 70s, the guys like a Paul Suggett or Gaylord Palace. They were playing offense and defense. It was more like basketball, if you will. You had to play on both sides of the floor. You had to run both sides of the floor.
Safe to assume you enjoyed that style of lacrosse better, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to sound like an old man.
No, you don't.
But I really do. I think the both sides of the ball, it's just a different game.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, when I'll take friends out to the New Wings games, sort of doing my bit to proselytize, and these are guys that grow up, they know basketball, they watch a lot of hockey. I mean, box lacrosse may be new to them. And the thing that they find very frustrating is that when you have a clear, fast break, and then it stops. as soon as you cross the midway, you stop so you can change lines. And what are they doing? It takes out one of the most attractive and exciting elements of the game. I said at the beginning, Gene Hart, great Flyers play-by-play guy.
Yeah.
he did the Wings play-by-play, and he would do the commercials. And he'd say, box lacrosse, fastest game on 2 feet. And I don't know if you can say that anymore when it stops.
Yeah. Well, I hope you can, because I do at the end of every podcast, Steve. So I'm still saying it regardless.
It is. I mean, it may only be the fastest game for like half the floor instead of the full floor, but no, it's still, I mean, look, it's still a great game, or we wouldn't be talking about it now.
Here's what I wanted to throw at you, because this is something that popped in my head this morning, and that is, there's a real chance we won't see the NLL Cup issued. There's a real chance we won't see the Mann Cup issued. When was the last time we saw something where the Mann Cup was not even awarded?
I know it's hard to say, because I mean, my recollection is that even during the Spanish influenza, that they managed to cancel a Stanley Cup. It didn't slow down other sports. I mean, I just did an interview last week for a soccer publication talking about the Open Cup, which is the national competition we have here in the United States. And that wasn't canceled, not for World War I, World War II, an internal struggle they called the Soccer War in the 1920s. It wasn't stopped. And now we're looking at a situation where it's going to shut down the competition for the first time since 1913. I can't recall any. I mean, even with the battles over professionalism versus amateurism that you had at the turn of the 20th century, I can't recall any instance, even World War I, which Canada took much more seriously, much earlier than in the United States. I don't recall disrupting sports anywhere near as badly as this coronavirus is.
Pretty scary stuff, no doubt about it. As we speak with pro box lacrosse historian Steve Holroyd from crosscheck.com. All right, Steve, I know you're new to the podcast here. Evan and I like to play a little game called Who You Got, and we're doing it a little bit differently here because of the circumstances. So we've broken this down, 32 teams, 4 brackets. We're now into the final 4th bracket here, pre-1990. So we got teams that go from 1945 all the way up to 1988. And normally I'll say, okay, here we got the 6-1 Wings going up against the 7-2 Rush. Evan, who you got? But now, because you're on the phone here and you know way more about these teams than Evan and I do, I have some anecdotes down here, but I'll kind of tee this up, and then you can add to it and then tell us who you're picking to win this game and why. Make sense?
Okay.
All right.
Perfect sense.
Our first matchup is the 1975 Long Island Tomahawks. I was just 2 years old here for the Tomahawks when they moved from Rochester after winning the title back in 74, led by Rick Bission. Steve, taking on Rick Dudley, 81 goals in 28 games here. Dave Wilfong, Hall of Famer on that team as well. Taking on the 1945 Vancouver Burrards, who beat St. Catharines 3-0 in the Mann Cup. Frank Lee winning the Mike Kelly. Steve, tell us about these two teams, and then tell me who you got.
Okay, the 1975 Long Island Tomahawks, they were actually the defending champions, but as you point out, they were the defending champions, having won as the Rochester Griffins. And as the Griffins, their top star was Rick Dudley, who many people remember as a hockey player. He was with the Buffalo Sabres for us for real hockey.
Oh, I didn't know it was that Rick Dudley. Very cool.
Oh yeah, it's that guy. And for those of us who missed the World Hockey Association, including people like me who from the Philadelphia area would dial into the 50,000-watt Cincinnati station to listen to Stingers games, Dudley was a real star there. And, of course, he wound up being a GM and things like that. It was him. And he was not only a great goal scorer, but he was like Dave Schultz, too. He scored 81 goals, but he only played like a third of the schedule because he missed between hockey commitments and suspensions. He wasn't around. In fact, he wasn't around for the championship series because he was so wrapped up with the Sabres. But he wasn't even there in 75. The Long Island Tomahawks, after they moved, were actually a better team. They ran through the league, 31-17, a +100 goal differential. Some of the guys you mentioned, they had Dave Wilfong, Doug Hayes scored 104 goals and 126 assists. I mean, this was a dominant team. A guy named Merv Marshall was in goal. Remember that name because it's going to pop up a couple of times.
Okay.
It was just a deep team. Had three deep lines. But as you often find with great teams, they would dominate the regular season and then disappear come playoff time. They actually got knocked out by the eventual champions, the Quebec Caribou.
Yes.
And then, of course, the league folded. But it was, this team was particularly good because, again, remember the National Lacrosse League started in 74, and actually it had a good first year. And so in 75, for the first time, you saw some British Columbia players willing to make the trip. They sort of sat out 74 because I think the thought was up. We've seen pro soccer before, pro lacrosse before. There was an attempt in 68. There was sort of an attempt in 69. There was another attempt in 72. It doesn't work. We're going to sit it out. And then in 74, the National Lacrosse League was actually a bit of a hit. So you see like Al Luthwaite, who I think was with New Westminster, star for years.
Yes.
He came out and he got his 140 points. It's a great team. So you had those guys who were the defending champions and then won the regular season the following year. Kind of hard to argue against that, even though the Vancouver Burrards 45, and like you said, they swept for the Mann Cup. They played in the a pretty competitive league, the Inner City League out of British Columbia, which was Coquitlam and New Westminster and Vancouver and Victoria, and it was a solid circuit. Great box lacrosse being played. In that league, they went 20-4. They had a plus 126 goal differential in a 24-game season. Think about that. I know Pat Thiel was a top player. You mentioned the guy that won the MVP in the Mann Cup. So those are the two teams.
Who you got, Steve?
Who would I pick? I got to go with the Long Island Tomahawks.
Okay.
And it's just, I just think the modern game in 75, the tactics. I mean, by that point, the whole Jim Bishop full court press, shot clock kind of thing. I don't think the Vancouver team from 45 would have been able to handle the pressure. I got to go with the Tomahawks.
All right, Evan, who you got?
I'm actually going to take Vancouver for the sole reason that Long Island couldn't finish the job, right?
Okay.
But picture that, 48-game regular season back then? That was that's insane, right?
And mind you, it was supposed to be like 56 about 3/4 of the way through the season. They said, no, we can't go
that is
far.
A lot. That's a lot of.
It was a mess.
Yeah, that's a lot of lacrosse. Okay, I'm going to take the Burrards here as well, guys. Frankly, went into Mike Kelly here. This team made up of Second World War servicemen. So these guys are just coming back from war and then stepping onto the lacrosse floor. I think these guys are going to be prepared to do whatever it takes to win this game. So give me the war veteran-laden Vancouver Burrards from 1945 taking out the Tomahawks. We'll post that vote up on Twitter post-haste here of the podcast. Moving along, next matchup, 88 New Jersey Saints, just the second year of the reborn National Lacrosse League, defeating the Washington Wave by a goal, 17-16, in front of over 8,100 fans. Second time they reached the championship here, but they are taking on a 19th. This is the only Minto Cup team that we have in this tournament here, and we could not leave out the Oshawa Green Gaels, who won, and check this out, folks, 7 Minto Cups in a row. Jim Bishop, the coach for all 7, and Don Stinson, never to be replicated again. 7 in a row time Minto Cup. I can't get, this might be the craziest lacrosse stat I've ever seen, that a guy won 7 straight Minto Cups. 60 Oshawa Green Gaels up against the New Jersey Saints. Steve, tell us about these teams, and then tell us who you got.
Let me start with the Green Gaels. And yeah, I mean, you think about 7 Minto Cups in a row is staggering. But then in a way, it's not, because you got to remember, Jim Bishop pretty much invented modern box lacrosse. And he did it, I mean, up until then, it was kind of like hockey pre the Soviet influence. Box lacrosse at that point was really kind of an up and down game. The wingers played wings, the center played center. and you just sort of kind of charge the net, and if you got a shot off, great. Bishop saw in American basketball, well, basketball generally, not American, but he saw in basketball, hey, wait, the whole concept of a full court press, pick and roll, screens. These are concepts that lend themselves well to the box game, and he started incorporating it. He had the Oshawa team, I think he formed it in 45, and he kept developing players and teaching the system, full court press, high tempo. He was playing like there was a shot clock before there was a shot clock.
Can I just get the record in here, Steve? 220 wins, 20 losses, and 1 tie. 220, 20, and 1 was Jim Bishop's coaching record with the Green Gaels. 9-14.
With that, I know it's stunning, and because as he literally reinvented the game, it took over 10 years for the rest of the world to catch up. And that high press style was just overwhelmed teams. And of course, it also helped that he had some really good players. I mean, you had the likes of Ross Jones and Gaylord Palace. Now they were on the 60 team, but Larry Lloyd. I mean, he had some really great players on that team, and so he had great talent in a new system that again, just people many years to adjust to. It was just a great dominant team. And then on the other side, you have the 1988 New Jersey Saints. Now, I have a soft spot in my heart for the Saints because they were one of the first teams I grew to hate with the new National Lacrosse League, the major indoor lacrosse league at the time. They were the best team in '87, even though they didn't get to the final. They closed the deal in '88, but you got to remember the early years of the it started out as the Eagle League, and then it was the major indoor lacrosse league. At that time, it was still basically, if not an all-American league, an all-collegiate league. It was basically a league of field players dabbling in box. Indeed, the league specifically went out of its way to call itself indoor lacrosse as opposed to box lacrosse because they took out, they removed what were considered some of the more violent elements of the game. And so while the 88 Saints were a good team in that league, it was essentially a group of, again, American-based field players who weren't that familiar with box. And those who remember at the time, if you want to know what a difference that was, when Canadians started entering the game, which happened when the league expanded to Buffalo and then Detroit, because then it was a shorter ride across the border, because again, this was a part-time league, you saw the gates, you saw the Buffalo Bandits come in and just destroy the league when actual Canadian box players were playing. You saw what a difference it was. So as good as the Saints were, the Green Gaels would have just ran them off the floor. So I'm going with Oshawa.
Okay, Evan, pretty hard to argue with that. Safe to assume you're taking the 7-time Minto Cup champion Green Gaels here.
Well, I'm taking the Saints. And the reason I'm taking the Saints is that I'm sorry. I respect all those titles in a row, but for one reason, and that is when you put the men up against the boys, I got a hard time believing the boys would win this one. I'm going to take the Saints.
Give me 7-time champion Don Stinson. Give me one of the greatest players of all time in Gaylord Palace, and give me the coaching brilliance of one Jim Bishop. I'll take the Green Gaels from 1960. Thank you very much. 2 matchups down, 2 to go here on Stampede Tack's Who You Got. By the way, Stampede Tack and Western Wear still open for business. You can find them online at stampede.ca, or you can call 1-800-745-5511. They got limited hours at the store right now, but they will do their very best to help you get set up with whatever you may need: boots, jeans, jackets, accessories, motorcycle leathers, you name it. Stampede.ca, shopping online, still shopping local. Make sure you support the sponsor. Okay, 1974 Philly Wings, led by John Grant Sr. and the aforementioned Larry Lloyd. These guys put up like 400 points between the two of them. Taking on the 1987 Brooklyn Redmen, this unit was no slouch either. They went undefeated for 3 years. 84 games straight they won. They beat the Bellies in 7 in the Mann Cup, however, in 87 at the end of that run. Brooklyn Redmen, 1987, 1974 Philly Wings. Steve, tell us about these teams, and then tell us who you got.
All right, well, I'll try to adhere to a time limit on this one because I can go on about my Philadelphia Wings
Yes,
forever. I have a real
please.
soft spot in my heart for this team. This is the team that introduced me to the game. And you can't. Was there ever a team with a better pedigree? The general manager was Jack Bionda, right? The coach was Bobby Allen, and the team was loaded up with a bunch of Peterborough Lakers players.
Oh,
it was Quan Collins, it was John Grant Sr., it was Wayne Platt in goal, Jimmy Watson, and then in the draft they stole from Jim Bishop one of his better players, Larry Lloyd, who winds up ringing up all kinds of points. This is a great team that ran through that league in the regular season in '74, got to the finals and lost in the finals to Rochester. But, they didn't have Quan Collins. He had a shoulder separation. It was really the heart of the team. But, you had, like you said, Grant, 78 goals, 89 assists for 167 points. Lloyd, 82, 91 for 173. Platt, if you look at the footage, and it's, again, plugged, plenty of it on the Crosscheck site, Platt is just this acrobatic post-to-post netminder that, nothing like what you see today in today's game, because he's not padded up like the Michelin Man. Just great, exciting, hard-hitting, just a fabulous team. Bobby Allen was a great coach with the Peterborough style. By the way, I just found this out. Bit of trivia. We all love the behind-the-back shots. And in '74, it was Grant Sr. Sr., what he could do, he would do that. And then the first time I picked up a stick, I spent hours trying to copy that behind-the-back pass, never mind the shot. I just found out last week that in the Peterborough area, that's called a Bobby Allen. Oh. Apparently, he kind of invented that, and he was coaching these guys, right? So, pretty good group. And again, they didn't win the title, but I think winning playoffs is kind of overrated as opposed to regular season excellence. So that's why I'm glad to see the 74 Wings on the list. And then they're going up against the Brooklyn Redmen. And, story team, great run. But
there's no way you're picking against the Wings here. There's no way.
Yeah, not only just based on loyalty, but I'm just of a mind, and I know professionalism, it's in quotes when you're talking about some of the money these National Lacrosse League guys are making, but I'll take a pro team over an amateur team anytime. And the Brooklyn Redmen, great players. The Gates were there along the way, Derek Keenan, all those great guys. Ted Sawicki, who wound up starring in the MILL with Detroit. No, I'm going with the Wings.
Okay. Evan, who you got?
No, I don't know if you know this, Steve. Derek Keenan, we laughed about this, is on 5 teams in this entire bracket. 5.
No, not this bracket. But the entire
out of the 32, which is
he's got a team in every bracket and plus
in every decade.
Yeah, in every decade plus 2 and 2 in the 90s. There you go. Yeah. Okay. So, who you got, Evan?
So I'm going to be very interested if Jake picks against Jammer. That would be very interesting. But I got to agree with those names that were on that Philly team. Era to era, I will take the Wings, despite the fact the Gates were on that Brooklyn team. It's still very early in their career. So, let's take the Wings on this one.
Yeah, 84 games in a row. You want to talk about a one-game showdown? When you win 8, that's 84 one-game showdowns in a row. But 84 games in a row over a 3-year span, like this.
Jack Bionda.
Yeah, I'm taking the Redmen. I'm taking the Redmen here. We're gonna.
They're due to lose. Come on.
I'm taking Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Lacrosse Club, now known as formerly the Brooklyn Redmen. Brooklyn Lacrosse Club. I'm taking Derek Keenan and the 84 straight games for Brooklyn here. One more matchup to go, and Steve, I got a little tied up today. I'm not gonna lie to you. I have no clue on either of these two teams. So I'm going to rely heavily on you for this final matchup. The 1968 Detroit Olympics taking on the 1961 New West O'Keeffes. Tell us about these teams. 62, excuse me. 1962, thank you, Evan. New West O'Keeffes. Steve, tell us about these teams, and then tell us who you got.
Well, let's start with the Detroit Olympics, because most people are probably thinking 1968 in Detroit. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the first attempt to bring pro box lacrosse back since the 1930s was in 68. a bunch of, not a bunch, but a handful of NHL owners in the East teamed up with the inner city lacrosse league teams in the West to try to go professional. And the Detroit Olympics were the best team in that league. And it's funny, go to Evan's point earlier, he picked against the Green Gaels with the men against boys analogy. Well, the 68 Olympics are basically the Green Gaels as men. The Detroit Olympics were Jim Bishop coached, and it was all Green Gaels alums, including, some of the things we mentioned, Gaylord Palace, Ross Jones, Larry Lloyd, goalie Merv Marshall, who's kind of like the Derek Keenan of this list. He's on 3 of the teams we've talked about. He got around as a goaltender. One nice anecdote, among the players that Detroit drafted was a guy named Doug Favell, who many people remember as being a longtime NHL goalie with the Flyers and Maple Leafs. But he was also one hell of a box lacrosse forward. And, he only got to play like 9 games with Detroit before the Flyers said, oh, no, wait, you got to come back. But he was a top goal scorer, and he left, and they still went and ran through the season 24-14, plus 70 goal differential. Again, they lost in the finals to a new Westminster team, but that's just, again, I think playoffs are always too fluky. So you had the Detroit Olympics, basically, again, as I said, the Green Gaels in professional form, and go look on our site. It's also one of the best jerseys I've ever seen, and in fact, I'm actually working to try to get reproductions done. The Detroit Olympics jersey, just so cool to look at. And then we go to the O'Keefes. It's one of the few years New Westminster played not as the Salmon Bellies, right?
Yeah, tell me about this, Steve, because this is interesting to me. Why they went with O'Keefes and not Salmon Bellies for a few years.
Well, it's basically what you see every day in soccer now. I mean, it was a concept of corporate sponsorship. I mean, the Vancouver team changed names like every 3 years, it seemed. It would be the Carlings, it would be this. It was whoever was paying the bills, right? And so for a couple of years, O'Keefe's Brewery said, hey, we'll sponsor your team. So suddenly they're the O'Keefes. But
it always comes down to the mighty dollar. I should have known.
Yeah, and there's no shame in that because, again, I mean, it wasn't like this wasn't NFL football today, right? I mean, if you're lucky, you got 1,500 people to come out to the barn. So whatever covered expenses, I guess you did what you had to do. But great team, went 25-4-1 in the regular season, plus 110 goal differential. Had guys like Cliff Sepka, Mike Gates, and Paul Parnell who would show up for the professional version of that team in '68. But what was the thing? They got knocked out of their inner city playoffs. So,
but like you said, playoffs don't matter.
This matchup is interesting because the West and the East play different styles. The West was a much more physical style of play as opposed to what the East, even in that professional league, were playing at the time. And so it would be like, Beauty versus the Beast. But, and again, we'll assume for the purpose of our matchup, there is a shot clock. So I'll have to go with the up-tempo Jim Bishop style play, being able to keep the O'Keefes at bay. I'm going with Detroit.
Evan, who you got?
You know what? I brought out the old coin.
Oh.
And the old, yeah. we sometimes, when we're so confused, we don't know what to do, we literally flip a coin because the coin does better than we do. And the coin says to take the O'Keefes.
Okay. I am also, I'm not to go against you again here, Steve, but I'm also going with New Westminster, where I played my senior A lacrosse. And any time that you mention the names Cliff Sepka and Paul Parnell, 2 of the retired jerseys in fabled Queen's Park Arena, these guys are absolute legends. I got to take the O'Keefes on this one to beat the Olympics. That's a tough pick now that you said that. I didn't know that about the Green Gaels all playing for the Olympics. That's a very tough pick for me. But I'm going to go with New Westminster on this just because it's close to home, and I got all sorts of respect for Parnell and Sepka. So that does it. We'll put the votes up on Twitter, and then the fans will have their say on who moves into the Sweet 16 and the pre-90s bracket. Steve, I can't thank you enough. That was a lot of fun, a lot of great information, and thanks so much for helping us out with all of this.
My pleasure. I love talking history. It's people need to know this stuff, and anytime. My pleasure.
One more time, crosscheck.com if you want to check out some footage from lacrosse yesteryear. I highly suggest you do that. Some great stuff up on there. Also, a thank you to Associated Labels and Packaging, who I failed to mention coming into the program, focusing on people, ethics, and quality, also family-owned and still open for business right now during COVID-19. AssociatedLP.com or at Associated LP as in labels and packaging. Thank you for their continued support. G. Wilson Construction, the Vancouver Warriors, of course, Stampede Tack and Western Wear. For Dan Richardson for coming on the program, for box lacrosse historian Steve Holroyd for joining us here as well. Get on Twitter, make your picks, give us a follow as well at ShemLax, at PXP for Sports, and at LaxClass. Finally, subscribe to the podcast, people, and then it gets delivered straight to your phone every single week. Steve, I expect you to do that right after we hang up the phone with you. And yeah, be safe, everybody. Keep washing your hands. Stay away from people. Stay home. And take care of yourself and your loved ones, and let's all get through this. Another episode in the books. Evan, thanks for hopping on here. Let's get out of here. Episode number 74 of Lacrosse Classified is now finished. For the fastest game on 2 feet, and for the creator, we'll talk to you next time here next Tuesday on the Lacrosse All-Stars Podcast Network.